Alternative ending: reincarnation of the strongest sword god. Chapter 71 Ancient Demon Court. The Book of Ends stored in the Fire Dragon Empire's library recorded some information on ancient demon gods. The ancient demon gods were a race that used to rival dragons, and the race was only second to the god race. Yet, as powerful as they were, the ancient demon gods had suddenly vanished from God's domain within a span of less than a year, leaving behind only descendants with trace bloodlines. Meanwhile, it was also because of the ancient demon gods' disappearance that God's domain's ancient era came to an end. However, only after gaining access to the greater God's domain did Shifeng understand part of the reason why the ancient demon gods had disappeared from God's domain. The ancient demon gods had touched upon God's domain's forbidden technologies. Meanwhile, these forbidden technologies laid slumbering in the various ancient demon courts, and they were the main reason why the greater God's domain's various powerhouses had desperately searched for ancient demon courts. After all, some of these powerhouses had only managed to gain their achievements and status in the greater God's domain thanks to the forbidden technologies they acquired from ancient demon courts. During Shifeng's previous life, due to his subworld lacking knowledge about the ancient demon courts, they hadn't put much importance on exploring and exploiting the various ancient demon courts found. As a result, when they gained access to the greater God's domain, the various outer world powers had severely oppressed them, and they had very nearly lost their subworld and their spot in the competition between parallel worlds. Shifeng never thought that he would come across an ancient demon court so quickly in this life. So, how could he not be excited by this piece of news? The reason why I managed to attract so many investors was mainly because of this ancient demon court, Sokyun Liu said, sighing. The value of an ancient demon court goes without saying. It is especially true when it is located in the miniature ancient world. Those investors naturally know this as well. However, you should also know that exploiting an ancient demon court isn't an easy task. You can't even get past the entrance without sufficient strength. So, the joint exploration of the ancient demon court was listed as one of the conditions in the partnership contract. In exchange for funding our guild, we will have to share the ancient demon court's harvests with those corporations. At the same time, those corporations will be sending the main force of the first-rate guilds they have shares in to help us in exploiting the ancient demon court. After discussion, we settled for a 70-30 split in their favor. I already signed the contract and told them the ancient demon court's location yesterday. They have even scouted out the area already. If we renege on the contract now, they can simply remove us from the equation and monopolize the ancient demon court for themselves. They also have the strength to do that. You should have told us sooner if you found an ancient demon court, Kyun Liu. Blackie said with a pained expression. The miniature ancient world had only been open for a few days, so it meant that Sokyun Liu had only discovered the ancient demon court not long ago. They could have secretly monopolized the ancient demon court if she had told them about her discovery earlier. Hearing Blackie's words, Fire Cloud said in dissatisfaction, "What can we do about it? How were we supposed to know about your potential? Now that things are already like this, if we want to acquire the ancient demon court's resources, we will have no choice but to accept their investment. They will only get 49% of the guild's shares, anyway. We still hold the right to make decisions with 51% of the shares." Upon hearing Fire Cloud's words, Sokyun Liu and Blackie looked toward Shifeng for a decision. If they accepted the investment, not only would they receive ample funding, but they could also acquire the ancient demon court's resources. The only problem was that they would have to give away a significant portion of the guild's shares. Even so, they would still hold the right to make decisions in the guild. However, if they refused the investment, they'd have nothing to do with the ancient demon court anymore. "I don't plan on accepting any investments," Shifeng said, shaking his head. "I already stated clearly that I do not wish for Zero Wing to be put under any restrictions. Even a possible restriction is unacceptable. I guess we'll have to give up on the ancient demon court, then," Sokyun Liu said, finding this situation a pity. She understood Shifeng's personality. Since Shifeng had said that he wouldn't accept any investments, he definitely wouldn't be accepting them. The ancient demon court was something her adventurer team had discovered by luck. Originally, she thought it would become their capital to establish a guild in the miniature ancient world. Yet, now, it had become the possession of those major corporations. Hearing Shifeng's decision, the members of Sokyun Liu's adventurer team couldn't help but lower their heads and sigh as well. The ancient demon court was a treasure trove that even the various superpowers would fight for. Yet, now, they had given one away with nothing to show for. Give up? Who said we are giving up? Shifeng couldn't help but roll his eyes when he heard Sokyun Liu's words. Then, in a serious tone, he said, since we were the ones who discovered the ancient demon court, it naturally belongs to us. But those corporations have already dispatched their teams, Sokyun Liu said awkwardly. I talked about this with them during our meeting just now. Originally, we would be heading for the ancient demon court after we were done talking with you, guild leader. Blackie was rendered speechless by Sokyun Liu's words. He didn't think that Sokyun Liu would act so decisively. At this time, Happy Snow's eyes suddenly flashed with inspiration as she suggested, how about we explore the ancient demon court with them without telling them about our plans first? You wish, Fire Cloud said, shaking his head and smiling as he looked at Happy Snow's scheming expression. Do you take these corporations for fools? They've already listed all of the preventive measures in the contract. Their teams will be holding onto the loot we get during the exploration. Only after the guild they've invested in is fully established will they hand our portion of the loot to us, or rather to the guild. Tell me it isn't true, Big Sis Kyun Liu, Happy Snow said as she looked at Sokyun Liu in dismay. Nodding, Sokyun Liu said, that is indeed the case. There are over 1 billion credits involved, after all. Those corporations also place significant importance on the ancient demon court's items. Doesn't that mean we won't get anything? Happy Snow asked in frustration. You don't have to do all these unnecessary things. Looking at Sokyun Liu, Shifeng said, just tell them that our partnership contract is dissolved. What about the ancient demon court, then? Sokyun Liu asked. We will go over there now and reclaim it, of course, Shifeng said. Then, he scanned the experts belonging to Sokyun Liu's adventurer team and continued, you guys are already prepared, right? Exploring an ancient demon court was indeed a challenging task. However, it wasn't so challenging that a first-rate power couldn't raid it. Meanwhile, it should be known that everyone present was a first-rate expert at the very least. If they set aside the difference in equipment, there was only a small difference between the strength of their team and a first-rate power's main force. Sokyun Liu also took a look at everyone present. Although their current team was no match for the teams those corporations organized, they weren't without a fighting chance. So, after gritting her teeth, she said, okay, I'll go tell them now. Chapter 72 Gathering at the Ancient Settlement. Grey Forest Mountain Range, Tifa Mine. Inside the dull grey mine illuminated by magic light, thousands of sword-wielding level 105 elemental golems laid motionlessly in front of a metal door measuring several dozen meters in height. If one looked carefully at these elemental golems, one would find that they were coated with anti-magic metal, which granted them superb resistance to magical attacks. Meanwhile, due to the nature of golems, the elemental golems also possessed superb physical resistance. Most importantly, every one of these elemental golems was a great lord. With several thousand of them gathered together, even a team of several thousand ordinary experts would have a tough time going up against them. Yet, now, these elemental golems had lost to merely a team of 500 players. As expected of an ancient demon court's guards. I didn't think they could form a super-gravity domain when gathered in groups of 100, a one-eyed man carrying a great sword on his back said as he kicked the elemental golem before him. Then, he turned to the beautiful and curvaceous woman beside him and said, thankfully, we have you leading the team, Goddess Ru. If it weren't for your frost flame domain counteracting their super-gravity domain, we would have had much greater difficulty getting to the ancient demon court this time. When the one-eyed man spoke up to this point, many of the surrounding people also turned to look at the beauty wearing a red robe and wielding a crystalline staff, their faces filled with admiration and reverence. This was because this beauty was none other than God's domain's famous frost flame goddess, Cleansed Rue. Not only was she a vice-guild leader in the first-rate Guild 100 Flower Palace, but she was also one of the top 100 experts in the God's Domain experts list. Ranking within the top 100 might not seem like anything special, but it should be noted that the secret pavilion only recorded 1,000 players on the God's Domain experts list. Moreover, even the weakest player on this list was at Tier 5. Thus, anyone capable of ranking within the top 100 was a top-tier domain realm expert. Meanwhile, in response to the one-eyed man's flattery, Cleansed Rue simply kept her staff away and indifferently said, "Even without my frost flame domain, nothing can go wrong here with you around, One-Eyed Ghost." One-Eyed Ghost was the most recent player to become one of God's Domain's 8 Sword Meisters. Apart from being an honorary elder in the first-rate Guild Nature Hall, he was also one of the top 100 experts in the God's Domain experts list. Moreover, he was even in possession of the incredibly powerful Darkness Domain. Before entering the miniature ancient world, he was regarded as one of the experts with the highest chance of reaching Tier 6. Meanwhile, One-Eyed Ghost was known for being a smiling tiger in God's Domain. He might have a cheeky personality on the surface, but he was actually an incredibly ruthless person on the inside. If their two guilds hadn't partnered to raid the ancient demon court, Cleansed Rue wouldn't have been willing to interact with someone like One-Eyed Ghost. "I might have a monodomain, but I am still only a swordsman. How can my monodomain possibly compare to that of a Tier 5 divine mage like yourself, goddess?" One-Eyed Ghost said with a light smile. Then, he sighed as he continued, "But it really is a pity. I thought I would get to travel with two great beauties this time. I didn't think that the other beauty would give up on partnering with our two guilds. It is indeed a pity." Cleansed Rue also sighed when she heard One-Eyed Ghost's words. Sokyun Liu was someone whom she had her eye on. Before, she had even tried to recruit Sokyun Liu into the 100 Flower Palace. After all, Sokyun Liu was not only a great beauty, but she also possessed excellent management capabilities. People like her were rare in God's Domain. Unfortunately, Sokyun Liu had rejected her invitation. Now, Sokyun Liu had even strangely given up on their partnership and the ancient demon court to join a newly established guild called Zero Wing. Cleansed Rue found this to be a truly bizarre situation. "That's because Sokyun Liu is stupid, Big Sis Rue. Not only did she reject our guild invitation, but she even gave up on our partnership to join some no-name guild. She'll definitely regret her decision later on," a level 102 female knight said contemptuously. Many of the 100 Flower Palace present silently nodded in agreement. While Tier 4 experts were indeed rare in God's Domain, they could, at most, serve as mainstays in the various first-rate guilds. A single Tier 4 expert wasn't enough to let a guild dominate an entire region. Meanwhile, Sokyun Liu's decision to join a newly established guild and abandon the opportunity to raid an ancient demon court was no different than putting the cart before the horse. It was an incredibly foolish action. However, Cleansed Rue didn't comment on the matter. After all, everyone had their own decisions. Immediately, she commanded through the team chat, "Everyone, rest up. We'll be going inside in a moment." Although the ancient demon court was an ancient settlement, its nature was more like a trial dungeon. The level of the monsters inside would change according to the player's level, and their levels could increase up to level 150. Meanwhile, after players successfully raided an ancient demon court, they would be rewarded according to their performance. An ancient demon court was essentially a dungeon that players could raid infinitely. Moreover, the rewards one could acquire would change every time depending on one's level and performance. Thus, one could also say that an ancient demon court was a treasure trove. Of course, this treasure trove didn't come without restrictions. Specifically, players could only enter an ancient demon court once every 7 days. In other words, a team could only raid an ancient demon court once a week. However, while this restriction might be severe toward individual teams, it wasn't as significant to a guild. After all, a guild had more than one team under its command. This was also why the ancient demon courts found on the main continent had become private grinding spots for the various powers. Meanwhile, in the miniature ancient world, where dungeons appeared randomly, the value of an ancient demon court was many times higher than on the main continent. Goddess Ru, I'll say this first, but, as per our agreement, you must let Nature Hall have the ancient demon court's key if it drops, One-Eyed Ghost said, smiling as he looked at cleansed Ru. Naturally. But don't forget that the inner zone's teleportation stone belongs to 100 Flower Palace, cleansed Ru reminded. Although the ancient demon court resembled a trial dungeon, it also possessed the properties of a settlement. So long as players acquired the key to an ancient demon court, they wouldn't have to worry about others occupying the ancient demon court in the future. This was because the key could be used to open or close the entrance to the ancient demon court. In addition, the inside of an ancient demon court could be split into 2 zones, outer and inner. However, players would need a specific teleportation stone to enter an ancient demon court's inner zone. Without the teleportation stone, players wouldn't be able to enter the ancient demon court's inner zone and acquire its true treasures. You can rest assured, Goddess Ru. Nature Hall sticks by its words. Not to mention, our 2 guilds have already signed a contract on this, One-Eyed Ghost said, chuckling. After both sides verified their arrangements once more, 100 Flower Palaces and Nature Hall's members finally merged into an actual 500-man team, which was also the ancient demon court's maximum entrance limit for a team. Chapter 73 Stop That Lunatic. After resting for around 10 minutes, cleansed Ru and One-Eyed Ghost gathered everyone to enter the ancient demon court. However, before they could enter, they heard the sound of footsteps coming from the cavern entrance. Immediately, the members of both guilds turned toward the source of the footsteps and saw a team of nearly 300 players led by a cloaked man entering the cavern. Walking beside the cloaked man was a beautiful woman, and this woman was none other than Sokyun Liu. Why are they here? Didn't already give up on partnering with our 2 guilds? Did they regret their decision? The members of 100 Flower Palace and Nature Hall began a quiet discussion among themselves as they looked at Sokyun Liu's group. What is Sokyun Liu trying to do, Big Sis Ru? Didn't she already terminate our partnership? Rain Song, the female knight carrying a round shield and a one-handed axe on her back, asked. They should be planning on raiding the ancient demon court by themselves by the looks of it, cleansed Ru said. They want to raid it themselves. Song Rain couldn't help but blink her eyes in disbelief when she heard cleansed Ru's answer. Are they stupid? Although the ancient demon court was only a trial dungeon, its raid difficulty was more than double that of Hell Mode team dungeons of the same level. Moreover, unlike Hell Mode team dungeons, the loot players could acquire from an ancient demon court was highly dependent on the evaluation they received, and the loot's quality would be reduced significantly if players couldn't achieve a high evaluation. The ancient demon court's raid evaluation was split into 5 ranks, D, C, B, A, and S. The difficulty of achieving a higher rank increased exponentially, and players would need to score at least a B rank evaluation for a high evaluation. This was also why their 2 guilds had dispatched their best players to raid the ancient demon court. Yet, now, Sokyun Liu was trying to raid the ancient demon court with her adventurer team that didn't even reach the standard of well-known adventurer teams. TL/N, ordinary well-known top adventurer team. Maybe they came prepared, cleansed Ru said as she moved her gaze from Sokyun Liu to Shifeng. Although I don't know who that swordsman is, the fact that he managed to get Sokyun Liu to join him must mean that he is strong. Hearing this, Song Rain retrieved her axe and shield and asked, should we get rid of them now? Now that Sokyun Liu had already withdrawn from their partnership, they were no longer in the same boat. Meanwhile, an ancient demon court in the miniature ancient world was of extraordinary value. Before the entrance key was found, anyone could freely enter the ancient demon court. It might be fine if Sokyun Liu's team lacked the strength to raid the ancient demon court, but it'd be a problem if her team did have the necessary strength. However, Cleansed Rue shook her head and said, "Let them be." "I concur," One-Eyed Ghost said, nodding. Then, he smiled as he continued, "They are aware of the ancient demon court's location. While we might be able to kill them here, if they publish the ancient demon court's coordinates to everyone out of spite, we'll be the ones to suffer. If the various superpowers learned of this ancient demon court, they definitely wouldn't let it be. Meanwhile, their two guilds couldn't guarantee that they could acquire the key on their first try. So, the best solution now was for both sides to keep the ancient demon court a secret and rely on their respective abilities to secure the ancient settlement." At the same time as Cleansed Rue and One-Eyed Ghost had come to an agreement, Sokyun Liu, Blackie, and the other members of the team couldn't help but feel shocked and anxious. "Crap! It's the Frost Flame Goddess and new Swordmeister." Blackie was flabbergasted when he saw Cleansed Rue and One-Eyed Ghost in the distance. With those two here, their team is probably on par with the various superpowers' main force. "Guild leader, I'm afraid it'll be tough for our team to compete with theirs," Sokyun Liu said to Shifeng with a worried look on her face. She didn't think that 100 Flower Palace and Nature Hall would send two such experts into the miniature ancient world. The strength of two top 100 Gods Domain Experts list experts was no laughing matter. Even if Cleansed Rue and One-Eyed Ghost were only at Tier 3 right now, it was still impossible for their team to win against these two experts. After all, each of these people could constitute an entire team by themselves. Raiding a dungeon and combat standards are two separate matters, Shifeng said nonchalantly as he glanced at Cleansed Rue and One-Eyed Ghost. "They might have a significant advantage over us, we have our own strengths as well." "Strengths?" Sokyun Liu asked skeptically. No matter how she thought over the situation, she couldn't figure out how their team was superior to the other party's team in any way. "Do we have any?" "Of course," Shifeng said. Then, he walked up to the ancient demon court's massive entrance and reached for the magic array engraved on it, saying, "For example, the ability to stir up trouble." As soon as Shifeng finished speaking, the magic array on the door suddenly glowed with a dazzling light. "Not good! Stop that lunatic!" One-Eyed Ghost shouted, his expression sinking when he saw the magic array activating. Although the ancient demon court was an ancient settlement, it had a few similarities with team dungeons. One example would be the different difficulty settings. Meanwhile, the ancient demon court had two difficulties, normal mode and hard mode. However, unlike team dungeons, the difference in raid difficulty in the ancient demon court's normal mode and hard mode was massive. Hard mode's difficulty was at least several times higher than that of normal mode. Moreover, once an ancient demon court's difficulty was set, it couldn't be changed again for a month. This crazy bastard! Cleansed Rue's expression also turned ugly when she saw Shifeng adjusting the ancient demon court's difficulty. If the difficulty was changed to hard mode, it'd become much more difficult for them to acquire a high evaluation. Meanwhile, it was almost impossible for them to acquire the ancient demon court's key without a high evaluation. However, before One-Eyed Ghost and Cleansed Rue could say anything else, another change occurred to the door's magic array. Specifically, the magic array's color had gradually changed from red to black. "Hell mode, how is this possible?" Cleansed Rue was utterly shocked when she saw the familiar skull illusion appearing in front of the door. At this time, apart from Cleansed Rue and One-Eyed Ghost, even Sokyun Liu couldn't help but be dumbfounded by this situation. In God's domain, it was common knowledge that the highest difficulty the ancient demon courts had was hard mode. Never had a higher difficulty been seen before. Yet, now, the black skull illusion unique to hell mode dungeons had appeared above the teleportation portal in front of the ancient demon court's entrance. "All right, now it is fair for all of us. Let's go in, then," Shifeng said before walking into the portal. The ancient demon courts indeed only had 2 difficulty settings on the surface. However, during his previous life, after his subworld gained access to the greater god's domain, the various powers in his subworld came to realize that the ancient demon courts actually had a hidden difficulty hell mode. Apart from being a much more challenging mode to tackle, hell mode was also the only place where players could acquire the true treasures the ancient demon courts had to offer. Meanwhile, activating an ancient demon court's hell mode was simple. All that was needed was for a Grandmaster Magician to adjust the difficulty setting. However, as Grandmaster Magicians and Tier 6 God-ranked experts typically wouldn't visit ancient demon courts, nobody in his previous life's subworld had noticed this feature until they gained access to the greater god's domain. Chapter 74 Success and Failure. Damn it! We were still a step too late. When Rain Song saw Sokyun Liu and the others rushing into the portal, she couldn't help but curse as she gripped her axe tightly. Lunatics! What a bunch of lunatics! A hell mode ancient demon court. This was something they had never even heard of. The ancient demon court's normal mode was already plenty challenging for most experts. In the case of hard mode, even after their 2 guilds had joined hands, they would still face extreme difficulty in obtaining a high evaluation. Now that the ancient demon court before them had its difficulty changed to hell mode, it'd probably be impossible for anyone to clear it with a high evaluation for 1 month. 1 whole month. There was no doubt that the ancient demon court's existence would get exposed during this long period. At that time, the various superpowers would definitely flock to this place, and neither their 2 guilds nor Sokyun Liu's group would benefit from the ancient demon court. At this time, other than Rain Song, Nature Hall's one-eyed ghost also wore a grim expression on his face. While staring at the portal Sokyun Liu had disappeared into with a cold gaze, he said, "Good. Very good. As expected of someone capable of making a name in the Black Dragon Empire." If the ancient demon court's difficulty was only changed to hard mode, their team could still cope with it one way or another. While their chances of obtaining a high evaluation wouldn't be 100%, they should still have around a 60% chance of succeeding. However, it was a different story for hell mode. He had no confidence that their team could score a high evaluation in a hell mode ancient demon court. After all, even in normal team dungeons, the difficulty gap between hard mode and hell mode was massive. This gap would only be even more significant in ancient demon courts. Meanwhile, players would be subjected to a 1-week cooldown when challenging the ancient demon court. If they failed to receive a high evaluation after clearing it, they'd have to wait for 1 whole week before they could try again. Many variables could occur in 1 week in the current miniature ancient world. "What should we do now, Big Sis Rue?" Rain Song asked as she turned toward Cleansed Rue. "Now that those lunatics have activated the ancient demon court's hell mode, should we still move according to plan and go inside?" "We'll wait," Cleansed Rue said as she stared at the black skull above the teleportation portal. "Although they've messed up our plans with this move, it isn't necessarily a bad thing for us. While the ancient demon court's difficulty has indeed been increased, this is the first time a hell mode ancient demon court has appeared in God's domain. If we can succeed in raiding it, we'll probably get an astonishing harvest. I have already contacted the guild for reinforcements. I believe it won't be long before the higher UPS send more Tier 5 experts to help us." Upon hearing Cleansed Rue's words, Rain Song quickly came to a realization as she exclaimed, "That's right. How could I forget about this?" Risks and opportunities came hand in hand. This was an unchanging law in God's domain. Just like Cleansed Rue stated, having a hell mode ancient demon court appear wasn't necessarily a bad thing for them. On the contrary, if they could raid it successfully, the benefit they could reap from it would definitely exceed their imaginations. "As expected of you to notice this detail, Goddess Rue," One-Eyed Ghost said, his grim expression suddenly changing into a carefree one. Then, he lightly chuckled and continued, "Sokyun Liu might have thought that she was creating trouble for us, but she failed to realize that all she did was to give us even more benefits. It was true that neither of their guilds could field a team rivaling the various superpowers' main force. However, if their two guilds worked together and concentrated their top combatants into a single team, they could match the various superpowers' main force. After all, the number of Tier 5 experts their two guilds possessed was only slightly inferior compared to the various superpowers. Unless Tier 6 God-ranked experts were involved, their two guilds would remain mostly even with the various superpowers. Everyone, listen up. Seal this cavern with an advanced barrier immediately. One-Eyed Ghost commanded as he looked at the other Nature Hall members present. From now onward, nobody is allowed to enter or leave this place until our reinforcements arrive. So long as Sokyun Liu's team dies out of the dungeon, use the Deathlock scroll on them immediately. Unlike team dungeons, players were prohibited from using magic scrolls inside ancient demon courts. For this reason, ancient demon courts were much harder to raid than the average team dungeon. The inability to use magic scrolls naturally meant that players couldn't use return scrolls to leave an ancient demon court. In this situation, there were only two ways players could exit the dungeon: die or clear the dungeon. Apart from these two methods, there were no other ways for players to exit an ancient demon court. Yes, sir. Immediately, both Nature Halls and 100 Flower Palaces members started setting up advanced barriers around the cavern. With these barriers in place, even Tier 4 players would have difficulty entering or leaving the cavern. After seeing several barriers go up around the cavern, One-Eyed Ghost looked toward the teleportation portal, a cold glint flashing in his eyes as he thought to himself, "Let's see if you'll still be as tough once you come out of the dungeon." Meanwhile, Cleansed Rue couldn't help but shake her head and sigh when she noticed the killing intent One-Eyed Ghost radiated. Although she didn't know what had caused Sokyun Liu to take such a crazy action, there was no question that Sokyun Liu had angered their two guilds. After all, neither of their two guilds had initially planned on dispatching many Tier 5 experts into the miniature ancient world. This situation had foiled many of their plans, and they'd have to halt and reorganize their plans. Right now, even if she chose not to take action against Sokyun Liu, One-Eyed Ghost definitely wouldn't let Sokyun Liu get away. He might even hunt down Sokyun Liu's team until they all deleted their accounts. After all, this wasn't the first time One-Eyed Ghost had done such a thing. Chapter 75 One Person's Strength. Inside the ancient demon court, Sokyun Liu and the others remained wholly unaware of what was going on outside. Even if they did know what was going on, they wouldn't be in the mood to care since they were currently in shock over the environment inside the ancient demon court. What violent mana! So, this is hell mode. Everyone's faces paled when they looked at the dilapidated settlement and the death energy that filled the streets before them. Although they had long since known that an ancient demon court's hell mode wouldn't be an easy challenge, they never thought it would be this difficult. Setting aside the violent mana that constantly inflicted pain onto their bodies and affected their ability to control their bodies, just the death energy that filled the settlement's streets was more than enough to instill despair into them. Death energy was a special type of energy with extremely powerful corrosive effects. It might be fine if it was present in scant amounts. At most, it would only prevent players from operating their bodies normally. However, if the presence of death energy was so dense that it was visible to the naked eye, it would be fatal to players. Even if death energy was only visible as a thin layer of grey gas, it was already more than enough to corrode players' minds and rapidly reduce their concentration. Meanwhile, if players' concentration fell below the critical threshold, their characters would become an empty shell, and it'd be no different than if they had died. "I'm afraid there's no way we can raid this ancient demon court, Guild Leader. Setting aside the violent mana, just the death energy that's floating in the air is already too much for us to handle. Apart from those with a gold mana body, everyone else would die in under 30 minutes," Sokyun Liu said, a bitter smile forming on her face as she looked at Shifeng. Originally, before entering the Hell Mode Ancient Demon Court, she had thought that they might have a chance at clearing it. After all, their team was not weak by any means. However, after entering the Ancient Demon Court, she realized that she had been too naive. With such a harsh environment, even the 5 great super guilds' main force would probably have difficulty surviving in such an environment. Not to mention, the bosses in level 100 Hell Mode team dungeons were typically tier 4 mythic monsters that had their HP, attack power, and defense boosted significantly. After getting strengthened, their overall strength could rival mythic ranked archaic species found in the outside world. Meanwhile, seeing as they were inside a Hell Mode ancient demon court, the boss they had to face was probably on par with mythic ranked world bosses. In other words, they had to face a mythic monster with at least 50% more basic attributes than the average mythic monster. Death energy and violent mana. After surveying their surroundings, Shifeng nodded and said, "It seems we got lucky." Lucky. When Happy Snow heard Shifeng's words, she couldn't help but roll her eyes at him. She felt that Shifeng was truly skilled at consoling people. How could their current situation even be considered lucky? Faced with such dense death energy, Happy Snow felt that she could, at best, last half an hour with her peak silver mana body. As for the others with weaker mana bodies, they probably wouldn't last more than 15 minutes. As soon as they stepped into the settlement before them, they'd be taking a ride on Hell's tour bus. They could probably meet God even without fighting. "We are indeed very lucky," Shifeng said, calmly smiling when he saw the look of contempt Happy Snow was giving him. Ancient demon courts are products of the ancient era. When we consider the fact that the ancient demons were suddenly wiped out and the ancient demon courts were sealed, we can consider ourselves lucky that all we have to face right now is a little death energy and some mana fluctuations left behind from back then. Shifeng had visited quite a few ancient demon courts during his previous life. Among them, many had much harsher environments than the one they currently faced. In one instance, not only did he have to deal with violent mana and dense death energy, but he also had to be wary of a temporal storm that was capable of obliterating everything. Even a random gust of wind that came out of that temporal storm could severely injure a superior mythic. Meanwhile, the temporal storm back then had covered the entire settlement. The scene back then was both beautiful and devastating. In comparison, the ancient demon court here only had violent mana and death energy. Among the many ancient demon courts in existence, it could be considered a relatively mild one. "What should we do next, guild leader?" "We have no way to retreat now, but we can't progress in such an environment, either. Even with my gold mana body, I doubt I can last more than an hour. If I have to fight monsters on top of that, I don't think I can last more than 20 minutes, Blackie said anxiously as he looked at the settlement ahead. While a gold mana body was stronger than a silver mana body, it wasn't invincible. It merely provided players with stronger adaptability. "Don't worry. Since I decided to come here, I naturally came prepared," Shifeng said, chuckling. "Whether it is the violent mana or death energy, both are merely a form of external energy. Why do you think a gold mana body can have a better time adapting to harsh environments?" Upon hearing Shifeng's question, Blackie immediately came to a realization as he said, "It's because of the enhanced control it provides toward mana. So long as we can control the mana around us, we'll be able to resist the mana and death energy here." "That's right." Shifeng nodded. Rather than a dungeon, an ancient demon court is more like a trial for players. If players can control their mana well, they can drastically reduce the pressure they face from the surrounding environment. As soon as Shifeng finished speaking, whether it was the violent mana or death energy surrounding him, both had stopped half an inch away from his body. It looked as if there was an invisible barrier surrounding him. "What powerful mana control!" Fire Cloud mentally exclaimed when he saw what Shifeng just did. Forming a mana barrier around one's body was easier said than done. This was due to the way players visualized mana. It was especially true when the mana in question came from one's own body. The average player couldn't see or touch mana at all, and the only way they could manipulate their mana to form an external barrier was through relying on magic arrays. The process of forming an external mana barrier was essentially players compressing the mana they radiated to form a dense coating of mana around their bodies. It shouldn't be mistaken with the action of severing one's mana flow to prevent one's mana from leaving one's body. The two achieved entirely different effects, and the former was much more difficult to accomplish than the latter. Meanwhile, the closer the compressed layer of mana got to one's body, the denser it would become. As a result, the resistance it put up would also grow stronger. Without incredible control over mana, there was no way a player could compress their mana to within half an inch of their body. With Shifeng's reminder, everyone present started compressing their mana to form a barrier that repelled the violent mana and death energy surrounding them. Fortunately, everyone present was a veteran expert. They possessed excellent control over mana, and everyone managed to form a barrier that was, at most, 1 yard thick. In Sokyun Liu's case, she managed to form a half-inch thick barrier with ease, and none of the surrounding violent mana and death energy managed to affect her in the slightest. Well done! Shifeng nodded approvingly when he saw that everyone had more or less managed to resist the surrounding environment's effects. Alright, let's start the raid for real now. I'll be splitting you all into 3 separate teams from now on. All Guardian Knights and Shield Warriors will be in Team 1, the remaining melee players will be in Team 2, and all ranged players will be in Team 3. Without my command, nobody in Team 2 is allowed to take action. As for Team 1, you are only allowed to use your shields to block the attacking monsters. You are forbidden from attacking and attracting aggro. For Team 3, you will attack whichever monster I tell you to attack. You are not allowed to attack any other monsters. Chapter 76 Guild Leader. After splitting the team into smaller groups, Shifeng led the team to within 500 yards of the settlement. Upon reaching this point, a large group of fully armed elemental golems suddenly marched out of a corner of the main street and entered their view. The elemental golems were of varying sizes, the smaller ones measuring around 2 or 3 meters and the larger ones measuring up to 8 meters. At a glance, there should at least be 10,000 elemental golems in the group. Apart from their large numbers, these elemental golems also behaved like a well-trained army. The golems wielding shields stood at the front, the golems wielding spears stood in the middle, and the golems wielding staves stood at the rear. Elemental Destroyer, Great Lord. Level 105. HP 300 million. Elemental Annihilator, Grand Lord. Level 106. HP 1 billion. Crap. Are you kidding me? Why do these monsters have so much HP? Blackie felt his scalp turning numb when he saw the elemental golems' stats. The HP of these golems was at least twice as high as monsters of similar rank and level found in the outside world. Sokyun Liu, Happy Snow, Fire Cloud, and the others also frowned at this situation. Unlike monsters, players were restricted by the hidden attribute known as stamina. In other words, the amount of time they could spend fighting was limited. It was especially true during intense fights. Right now, their team only had 300 players. Normally, they'd have exhausted most of their stamina even if they fought against just 2,000 or 3,000 great lords of the same rank. Yet, now, not only did they have to face over 10,000 great lords and grand lords, but these monsters even had unusually high amounts of HP. Rather than a trial, what awaited them ahead was a massacre. Guild Leader, it's too disadvantageous for us to fight against such a larger group of monsters. We'll run out of stamina before we can even finish them. I suggest that we split the team and conduct guerrilla warfare using the small alleys, Sokyun Liu suggested. Fighting a large-scale battle while being severely disadvantaged in numbers wouldn't benefit them in any way. In comparison, while splitting up the team across the settlement's alleys would scatter the team's strength, it would also reduce the number of monsters each player needed to face. This, in turn, would reduce their stamina consumption and increase their endurance in battle. The elemental golems were merely monsters with high physical and magical resistances. They didn't have extraordinary combat standards. At most, their combat standard reached the Trial Tower's 5th floor early stage standard. In a situation where the gap in basic attributes wasn't too significant, first-rate experts would have no problem going up against 3 or 4 golems at a time. Blackie, Happy Snow, Fire Cloud, and the others also nodded in agreement with Sokyun Liu's suggestion. After seeing the scale of the monster army before them, they finally understood why the ancient demon courts and various secret lands remained the private playground of only first-rate powers and above. Without a significant advantage in basic attributes, experts of their caliber had no way of fighting large-scale fights in these dangerous locations whatsoever. Faced with so many tanky monsters, it wouldn't matter even if they worked together. There was simply no way they could achieve victory. Although it was a bit of a pity to split up their combat power, this was the best solution available to them. Afterward, all they could do was hope that a few healers could survive until the dust settled so that they could resurrect those who had died in battle. No need to go through such hassle, Shifeng said, shaking his head. While these elemental golems might be numerous, they have a fatal weakness. Fatal weakness? After thinking for a moment, Sokyun Liu asked, is it the density of their surrounding mana? Unlike other creatures, elemental creatures relied heavily on mana. The more violent and denser the surrounding mana, the stronger elemental creatures would become. Of course, the reverse was also true. Nodding, Shifeng said, that's right. The reason why these golems have such high HP is largely due to the violent mana here. So long as we lower the density of the ambient mana or stabilize it, we can nullify the buffs of these golems. Ancient demon courts existed to test players, not to kill them. Thus, there were tricks to raiding every ancient demon court. So long as players found the trick, the raid difficulty would plummet. This was also why Shifeng dared to challenge a Hell Mode ancient demon court with Sokyun Liu and the others. After Shifeng finished speaking, everyone's eyes glowed in excitement as they turned toward Sokyun Liu. Don't look at me. The mana here is too violent. It'd take an incredibly powerful mana domain to expel or stabilize the mana here, Sokyun Liu said with a bitter smile when she noticed the hopeful gazes everyone was giving her. I might have a peak silver mana body, but my mana control still isn't enough for me to cast a mana domain. After hearing Sokyun Liu's words, Happy Snow and Fire Cloud turned toward Blackie. Blackie's mana body was stronger than even Sokyun Liu's. Moreover, he had even completed his gold mana body at an 85% completion rate. A mana body of this caliber could rank at the top even among the various superpowers' top-tier talents. Me. Scratching his face awkwardly, Blackie said, I'm no good, either. With my control over mana, I don't even know if I can cast a mana domain after reaching tier 4 let alone now. Blackie might have a gold mana body, but the way he obtained it could be considered borderline cheating. If he hadn't relied on Shifeng's real-time instructions and some luck, it would have been impossible for him to construct a gold mana body with an 85% completion rate. In comparison, Sokyun Liu had relied entirely on her own efforts to construct her peak mana body. When it came to mana control, she was undoubtedly much better than him. Upon hearing Blackie's helpless words, everyone present despaired a little. If even the team's 2 strongest magical class players couldn't cast a mana domain, it was even more impossible for everyone else. You don't need to worry about the matter with the mana domain. I have a solution for that, Shifeng suddenly said. Just follow my orders afterward and attack the elemental annihilators that charge forward. Magical classes, don't hold anything back and dump everything you have. He has a solution? Sokyun Liu couldn't help but look at Shifeng in surprise and confusion. After all, players could only create a mana domain when they had developed their mana control to an extreme level. It wasn't something that could be obtained via words alone. However, before Sokyun Liu and the others could figure out Shifeng's words, the elemental golems had already moved within 50 yards of their team. This distance was already within the attack range of Great Lords and Tier 3 players. Tier 3 assassins could even cross this distance in just 2 steps. Attack! Shifeng commanded, having already moved within 40 yards of the nearest elemental annihilator. Upon hearing Shifeng's command, everyone stopped holding back and used their skills and spells one after another. The magical class players, in particular, used their trademark moves right off the bat, bombarding the elemental annihilators, charging at the forefront with AoE spells and large-scale combination spells. Some had even used Tier 3 curses. For a time, the land between both sides turned into a sea of flames. The ground also shook violently as if a meteor had just hit the ground. What power! Is this the effect of violent mana? Happy Snow was a little dumbfounded when she saw the devastated battlefield. Even though they were only casting Tier 3 spells, the raw power their spells exuded rivaled Tier 4 spells. Because of their spells, the elemental annihilators had their advance forcibly halted, and damages exceeding 1,000,000 appeared above their heads one after another. However, before everyone could celebrate this situation, what took place next instantly extinguished the confidence they just recovered. The cracks on the elemental annihilators' bodies were rapidly mending, and even their HPs were healing at a rate visible to the naked eye. The recovery speed of these monsters was far superior to the monsters found in the outside world. At this time, the shield-wielding elemental destroyers had also caught up to the elemental annihilators. Then, with their shields raised, these elemental destroyers blocked the oncoming skills and spells without getting affected in any way. Subsequently, when less than 30 yards separated both sides, and Fire Cloud and the other tanks were subconsciously trembling while wielding their shields. Halt! A low voice suddenly echoed throughout the team. Immediately afterward, an invisible ripple spread across the entire battlefield, causing the violent mana to settle down and mana density to plummet. Meanwhile, along with these abrupt changes to the ambient mana, all elemental golems standing within the affected area had their movement speeds reduced drastically and their HPs reduced to less than 1/3 of their original. Moreover, their body sizes had shrunk by half, their basic attributes had fallen by over 30%, and their battle recovery had halted completely. Guild Leader. Chapter 77 Flying Improvements. Sokyun Liu's eyes widened in shock as she looked at Shifeng. She dared not believe that such a powerful mana domain actually came from Shifeng. A mana domain. It was something that only those who had achieved incredible mastery over mana could possess. It should be known that even the various superpowers top-tier geniuses wouldn't necessarily be able to cast a mana domain when they first reached Tier 4. Yet, now, Shifeng had cast a mana domain as a Tier 3 swordsman. Moreover, the strength of his mana domain was so great that it could even suppress Grand Lords in all aspects. This was a feat that she had only ever heard of in rumors. Meanwhile, Happy Snow, who stood guard beside Sokyun Liu, was also dumbfounded by this situation. Then, after snapping out of her daze, she asked Sokyun Liu, "Is he really just Shadow's former guild leader, Big Sis Kyun Liu?" At this moment, Sokyun Liu and the members of her adventurer team weren't the only ones shocked and confused by this situation. Blackie and the others, who had stayed with Shadow all these years, also couldn't help but doubt their eyes as they looked at Shifeng. "Brother Feng." "No, guild leader." Blackie was at a loss for words as he looked at Shifeng's mana domain. Compared to the shock he received when he received the Holy Annihilation mana technique from Shifeng previously, the shock he felt now was many times greater. There were more than 10,000 Great Lord and Grand Lord ranked elemental golems here. Yet, now, with just one move, Shifeng had crippled every one of these powerful monsters. "Alright, I know what you want to say, but our priority now is to clear out these elemental golems first," Shifeng said as he pointed at the golems ahead. "Right. We have to get rid of these golems first." Immediately, Blackie, Sokyun Liu, and the others promptly snapped out of their daze and got serious. Then, following Shifeng's command, the melee players of the team charged at the elemental annihilators. Due to Shifeng's mana domain, the mighty elemental golems were nothing but a joke now. Under the mana domain's effects, not only did the golems lose a significant portion of their basic attributes and HP, but their reaction speeds had also dropped by 30% or more. Now, instead of being stronger than their counterparts in the outside world, these elemental golems had become weaker instead. For a time, Happy Snow and the team's other melee players slaughtered the elemental annihilators and destroyers, converting these monsters into EXP for everyone. Unlike team dungeons, the monsters in ancient demon courts provided much higher EXP than monsters found in the outside world. It was even more so for the monsters in a hell mode ancient demon court. After including the level gap bonus, the EXP the elemental golems provided was several times higher than their counterparts in the outside world. In less than 4 hours, the team wiped out the 10,000 plus elemental golems. Meanwhile, the abundant EXP everyone received had boosted Blackie and the others from level 100 to level 103. As for Shifeng, Sokyun Liu and the others, they had leveled up from 102 to 104. In the current miniature ancient world, they were undoubtedly at the forefront when it came to levels. However, compared to the EXP they gained, everyone paid more attention to the loot the elemental golems dropped. As elemental creatures, the elemental golems did not drop any coins. Instead, they dropped magic crystals and various types of elemental cores. On average, a magic crystal would drop for every 2 or 3 elemental destroyer killed. Magic crystals was a hard currency on the market. It was needed for many aspects of God's domain. Since players weren't allowed to bring magic crystals with them when they entered the miniature ancient world, the current market value of magic crystals was around 50 silver each. Moreover, one wouldn't necessarily be able to buy any magic crystals even if one had the money. Yet, now, the elemental golems had dropped over 6,000 magic crystals. In addition, the elemental golems also dropped over 1,000 level 100 and level 105 weapons and equipment. Although they were all at the fine gold rank, they were still better than the level 100 secret silver ranked beginners equipment. Seeing the elemental golems drop over 1,000 fine gold weapons and equipment, everyone couldn't help but be amazed by the hell mode ancient demon court's profitability. If they came here at level 150, the harvest they could acquire would be massively beneficial to their guild. Guild leader, something good dropped, Blackie said excitedly as he ran up to Shifeng with a dark red plate armor in his hands. Tier 3 mana equipment. Shifeng also grew interested when he saw the magic patterns and magic arrays engraved on the chest piece. Mana equipment was different from conventional equipment. They were not divided by ranks, only tiers. The boost to basic attributes mana equipment provided was also changed according to the user's level. They were similar to epic weapons and equipment in a sense. Moreover, the basic attributes mana equipment provided could rival the average epic weapon and equipment. The skills and spells that came with mana equipment even possessed superior effects than most epic weapons and equipment. The only flaw with mana weapons and equipment was the fact that they were consumables. They would become useless once their durability ran out. They couldn't be repaired from conventional equipment. It is indeed tier 3 mana equipment, but it isn't the same mana equipment that we know, Blackie said, shaking his head. Then, in an even more excited tone, he continued, instead, it's a piece of ancient mana equipment. I've already had Kyun Liu check it, and this ancient mana equipment doesn't have the same durability limitation as ordinary mana equipment. We can replenish its durability using magic crystals. How many pieces did we get? Shifeng asked, his eyes lighting up in excitement when he heard Blackie's words. According to Blackie's introduction, this ancient mana equipment was none other than the mainstream equipment used in the greater God's domain. If they could collect a full set of this ancient mana equipment, the boost in combat power it could provide to a player would surpass even that of an epic set equipment. After all, apart from providing players with a significant amount of basic attributes, this ancient mana equipment could also help players significantly in their control over mana, skills, and spells. It could even help players with their combat techniques to a certain extent. Meanwhile, Blackie chuckled and raised 5 fingers upon hearing Shifeng's question. 5 pieces. Shifeng grew a little disappointed when he saw Blackie's response. If only 5 pieces dropped, there definitely weren't enough to make a set. The average mana equipment came in 6-piece sets, while the best came in 8-piece sets. Meanwhile, mana equipment that wasn't in a complete set would only be slightly stronger than dark gold equipment of the same level. No, it's 50 pieces. A whopping 50 pieces dropped. We hit the jackpot this time. Blackie laughed. Moreover, out of these 50 pieces, we managed to come up with 6 complete sets. 3 sets are for physical melee classes, 1 is for physical ranged classes, and 2 are for magical classes. Can you speak in full next time? Shifeng rolled his eyes at Blackie. Inwardly, though, he was very excited over this situation. 6 sets of ancient mana equipment would greatly help their current team. I already brought a physical melee set here for you. Here, try it on, Blackie said as he took the remaining 5 set pieces out of his bag. You are Zero Wings Guild leader, after all. Others will laugh at us if you keep wearing beginner's equipment. When Shifeng took a look at the equipment he currently used, he felt that Blackie's words made sense. Although the Winter of Eternal Night was a fragmented legendary weapon, it was still no excuse for him to wear beginner's equipment as Zero Wings Guild leader. Zero Wing would become a joke if others saw him in such a state. Chapter 78 Tier 4 Threshold. As soon as Shifeng put on the Night Watcher set, the Tier 3 Ancient Mana set equipment, his aura instantly underwent a complete transformation. Shifeng had to admit that the Night Watcher set really made him stand out like a sore thumb. Not only was the armor set strikingly pitch black, but it was also engraved with blood-red runes all over. The armor even emitted a faint black mist. In the blink of an eye, he had gone from looking like an ordinary passerby to looking like a gent who had just stepped out of hell. Aside from appearances, the Night Watcher set also provided astonishing bonuses in basic attributes. Shifeng's strength attribute instantly reached the Tier 4 threshold upon donning the armor set. That's right. The Tier 4 threshold. It wasn't just close to reaching the Tier 4 standard. Instead, it was at the Tier 4 standard already. Now, he could exhibit power at the Tier 4 standard even without employing any techniques. At this time, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to describe him as a humanoid beast. As for the 5 remaining ancient mana equipment sets, Shifeng allocated them to Blackie, Sokyun Liu, Happy Snow, Fire Cloud, and Desolate Star, a ranger and a vice commander in Sokyun Liu's adventurer team. Upon distributing these sets, the team's overall combat power instantly increased by a significant margin. Outside the ancient demon court, due to the sky outside darkening, the inside of the cavern also grew darker and colder. Unlike before, there were over 1,000 expert players currently gathered in the cavern, and even the weakest among them was a first-rate expert. The number of Refinement Realm experts had also increased to over 100. Such a team was a force to be wary of no matter which part of God's domain the team was put in. I can't believe the mighty one-eyed ghost actually got toyed by a nameless junior. If the guild leader learns of this, he'll probably laugh for half a year, a wild-looking man carrying a large saber on his back said, laughing as he looked at one-eyed ghost. Yet, despite this wild-looking man's ridicule, one-eyed ghost had surprisingly chosen to remain silent. He did not do anything else besides glare at the other party to express his dissatisfaction. Seeing one-eyed ghost's abnormal behavior, the other members of Nature Hall also chose to remain silent, none of them daring to speak up for him. There was only one person in the guild who dared to speak with one-eyed ghost in such a way was none other than Stalwart Bear, Nature Hall's strongest Tier 5 player. In addition, Stalwart Bear was the second strongest expert in the guild after Nature Manifestation, Nature Hall's guild leader and the guild's only Tier 6 God-ranked expert. Moreover, he was also Tyrant Blade of the 5 Blades, an equivalent ranking list to the 8 Sword Meisters. Since everyone is here already, should we discuss our subsequent plans? Stalwart Bear, a woman with short hair and crimson eyes from 100 Flower Palace suddenly spoke up. However, her tone indicated that she had no intentions of discussing anything whatsoever despite her words. Meanwhile, as soon as this short-haired woman finished speaking, the silence in the cavern grew even heavier, and many people couldn't help but lower their heads to reduce their presence. Don't tell me they're going to start a fight. When Rain Song saw Stalwart Bear's expression suddenly growing cold, she turned to Cleansed Rue, hoping that she could try to dissuade the short-haired woman from aggravating the already tense situation. Of those present, the only ones qualified to participate in a fight between Stalwart Bear and the short-haired woman were Cleansed Rue and One-Eyed Ghost. So, apart from them, nobody else had the qualifications to speak. "Don't look at me. There's nothing I can do about Crimson Heart," Cleansed Rue said in a helpless tone. Crimson Heart, 100 Flower Palace's first Vice Guild leader. Whether in terms of combat standards or individual combat power, Crimson Heart was second only to 100 Flower Palace's guild leader. She was an existence that rivaled Tier 6 God-ranked experts. Even after entering the miniature ancient world, Cleansed Rue still didn't think she could match Crimson Heart. "I can't believe you'd actually come to the miniature ancient world, you crazy woman. It seems 100 Flower Palace is betting everything on this place," Stalwart Bear casually said. He remained unfazed even in the face of Crimson Heart's oppressive aura. "Aren't you the same, you barbarian?" Crimson Heart calmly responded. "Well? Do you plan on going in, or stand guard outside?" "Go in." Stalwart Bear rolled his eyes at Crimson Heart. Then, he sneered and said, "Do you think Nature Hall runs a charity? Since these bastards dare mess with Nature Hall, they naturally have to pay the price. Isn't it just a hell mode ancient demon court? We can clear it any time we want." After hearing Stalwart Bear's words, Crimson Heart took a look at the time. It was nearing 10 hours since Shifeng's team had entered the ancient demon court. After so much time had passed, even if Shifeng's team was still alive inside, their stamina and concentration should be close to depletion, so it wouldn't be long before they exited the dungeon. Realizing this, Crimson Heart looked at Stalwart Bear and stated, 2 hours. 100 Flower Palace will only wait for 2 hours. After 2 hours, you must enter the dungeon with us. Hearing Crimson Heart's condition, Stalwart Bear cooperatively nodded and said, "So be it. I refuse to believe they can last for that much longer." Meanwhile, after Stalwart Bear and Crimson Heart ended their discussion, everyone couldn't help but sigh in relief. One-Eyed Ghost and Cleansed Rue were especially relieved. After all, they knew just how important the ancient demon court meant for their two guilds. They couldn't afford to be careless with it at all. If they wasted too much time waiting for Sokyun Liu's team to come out, there was a high risk of the various superpowers finding out and coming to contest it. If that happened, their chances of acquiring the ancient demon court would reduce significantly. Meanwhile, inside the ancient demon court, Guild Leader, the boss has appeared. Chapter 79 Mana Equipment Sets Effects. Upon hearing the Assassin Scout's report, Shifeng promptly assembled the resting members of his team and made his way to the assassin's location. Even though everyone had already been fighting in the ancient demon court for 10 long hours, none of them showed any signs of exhaustion. On the contrary, every one of them wore excited expressions on their faces. After grinding in the ancient demon court for many hours, everyone had to admit that a hell mode ancient demon court was a paradise for players. After killing only 2 groups of 10,000 plus elemental golems, Blackie and the others new to the miniature ancient world had already reached level 104. Shifeng, Sokyun Liu and the members of Sokyun Liu's adventurer team had even reached level 105. However, compared to levels, what surprised everyone more was the ancient mana equipment they acquired. Originally, they only had enough pieces to complete 3 sets. Now, they had 11 complete sets and 26 individual pieces. However, considering the guild's future development, Shifeng did not distribute the 5 new sets to anyone. Instead, he intended to put these sets into the guild warehouse and let guild members exchange for them using points. Nobody objected to Shifeng's decision, either. On the contrary, everyone strongly supported it. The Tier 3 ancient mana equipment sets were incredibly valuable. Previously, the people Shifeng had assigned the sets to were Zero Wings core executives, such as Sokyun Liu, her 2 vice commanders, and the talented Happy Snow. Every one of them was a refinement realm expert. As for Blackie, he was the person in charge of guild affairs. He also had a gold mana body. Thus, it wasn't strange for him to receive a set as well. Apart from those 5 players, the others were essentially equals. If Shifeng allocated the 5 new sets to someone, those who didn't get chosen would probably feel unreconciled. In that case, the wisest and fairest method of distributing these sets would be to put them up for exchange using GCPs. Everyone would have to rely on their own abilities to acquire the sets. There was also no need to worry that nobody would try to exchange the sets. Everyone had already witnessed the set in action before, and they couldn't help but drool over it. Before Blackie donned his ancient mana equipment set, the Grand Lord ranked elemental annihilators were still tough opponents for him. However, after putting on the set, every one of his tier 3 offensive spells could easily impact the movements of the elemental annihilators. If he used a tier 3 large-scale destruction spell, he could even heavily injure the elemental annihilators. Overall, the set had doubled the power of his spells. Compared to the ancient mana equipment set, the 6-piece epic equipment sets he had seen in the past might as well be wall decorations. Those without the mana equipment set weren't the only ones surprised by the set's effects. Sokyun Liu was also surprised by the effects. The average epic weapon and equipment could only grant players powerful basic attributes, physique bonuses, and additional skills. However, the mana equipment set was different. Although it didn't provide as huge of a boost to basic attributes, the boost it provided to the power and control of the user's skills and spells was on an entirely different level. As an X-Tier 4 player, Sokyun Liu could cast her spells with a 90% completion rate on average and 95% at best previously. However, after receiving the mana equipment set's bonuses, she could cast all of her Tier 3 spells at 100% completion rate, with some even reaching up to 102%. A 10% increase might not seem like much, but beyond 85%, every 1% increase in completion rate would improve a skill or spell's effects by at least 10%. That number would increase to 20% or higher past the 100% completion rate threshold. In other words, Sokyun Liu had the effects of her spells improved by at least 100% after putting on the mana equipment set. At this time, Sokyun Liu even had the illusion that her current self was not much weaker than when she was still at Tier 4 in the outside world. She was only missing a few Tier 4 spells and a stronger physique. Meanwhile, if even the ancient demon court's mobs had already provided such a huge harvest, the harvest they could acquire from clearing the ancient demon court would be unimaginable. Subsequently, after everyone ran for some time, they arrived in front of a dilapidated tower. Although a huge portion of the tower had crumbled away due to the erosion of time, the tower still measured over 200 meters in height. It looked like a huge mountain as it stood in the middle of the settlement. Meanwhile, situated at the bottom of this tower was a gigantic, pitch-black snake with 2 heads. Each of the snake's heads was the size of a 2-story house, and the snake's body measured over 100 meters in length. If it wasn't curled up right now, it could probably oversee the entire settlement if it decided to extend its body. The system must be insane. How can anyone get past a twin-headed destruction snake? Blackie cried out in frustration as he looked at the slumbering snake ahead. The twin-headed destruction snake. It was one of the top-ranking demonic beasts found during ancient times. Although its life rating was only slightly stronger than the average archaic species and nowhere near dragons, they were much more formidable than dragons in certain aspects, specifically, the twin-headed destruction snake's eyes of destruction. The demonic beast's eyes of destruction could launch powerful mental attacks against all targets they gazed upon. Depending on the target's strength, the eyes of destruction could even destroy the target's soul. Meanwhile, mental attacks were the most difficult type of attack to block in God's domain since players' defense was utterly useless against it. Players could only rely on their mental fortitude to resist them. If players failed to resist the twin-headed destruction snake's mental attacks, their souls would crumble, and they would die on the spot. Twin-headed destruction snake, ancient demonic beast, mythic. Level 106. 40 billion. As expected of an ancient demon court. It's no wonder why the various superpowers are the only ones capable of raiding ancient demon courts. This difficulty simply isn't something we can tackle, Fire Cloud said with a bitter smile. In Fire Cloud's opinion, the twin-headed destruction snake before them was even more frightening than a dragon of the same level and tier. Its HP of 40 billion was simply maddening. There was simply no way they could finish off the boss before they exhausted their concentration. 40 billion HP. Sokyun Liu also couldn't help but gasp when she saw the twin-headed destruction snake's stats. Originally, she thought they had a chance of raiding the Hell Mode Ancient Demon Court successfully after their team had received such a significant boost in strength. However, looking at the twin-headed destruction snake, she realized that it was merely wishful thinking. Setting aside the boss's combat standards, just the boss's eyes of destruction and frightening HP was already more than enough to dash any hopes for them to raid it. This was no longer a matter of lacking basic attributes. Faced against Tier 4 mythic ranked eyes of destruction, Tier 3 players would last no more than 5 minutes before their souls crumbled. Meanwhile, killing the twin-headed destruction snake in 5 minutes was nothing but a fool's dream. It's a twin-headed destruction snake? At this time, Shifeng also frowned when he looked at the slumbering twin-headed snake. Although he had long since known that it wouldn't be easy to raid a Hell Mode Ancient Demon Court, he didn't think that his luck would be this bad. Before reaching level 120, the average Hell Mode Ancient Demon Court would only be an ordinary superior mythic. Although the boss they currently faced wasn't a superior mythic, it was a top-ranking ancient demonic beast. After factoring in the bonuses in HP and basic attributes the twin-headed destruction snake received for being a dungeon boss, it was a much more challenging opponent than the average superior mythic found in the outside world. Chapter 80 10 million with one sword. Should we retreat now, guild leader? Blackie asked as he looked toward Shifeng. Without a Tier 4 team, there was no way they could take down the twin-headed destruction snake. It didn't matter even if they had a monodomain on their side. This was because top-tier ancient demonic beasts were born with monodomains. Thus, unless they had a master magic barrier, they would have no choice but to fight the twin-headed destruction snake at its peak. Retreat? Shifeng rolled his eyes at Blackie. We went through a lot of trouble to get here. How can we just retreat? But we'll suffer a huge loss if we fail to kill the boss and die, Blackie said reluctantly as he looked at his own level. We'll only lose 20% EXP if we get killed by mobs inside the ancient demon court. But if we get killed by the final boss, we'll lose an entire level. Had they challenged the twin-headed destruction snake before they increased their levels, they could have just challenged it without any worries. However, everyone on the team had already reached level 104 or level 105. They had already surpassed most players in the outside world in terms of level. Most importantly, level 105 was a small milestone that allowed players to equip level 105 weapons and equipment. So long as everyone on the team equipped themselves with level 105 fine gold equipment, they could head to a level 110 map to train and widen the gap between them and other players. After all, due to the significant level suppression in the miniature ancient world, even refinement realm experts wouldn't dare to grind in level 110 maps before reaching level 105. However, if they got team wiped by the final boss now, they would lose a significant portion of the advantages they had accumulated in the ancient demon court. Shifeng naturally understood what was going through Blackie's mind. Smiling, he said, although this twin-headed destruction snake is powerful, we aren't without a chance. We still have a chance. Blackie was stunned. Then, he subconsciously turned to the twin-headed destruction snake in the distance. He had a feeling that their entire team combined wouldn't even be enough to fill one of the twin-headed snake's mouths. Sokyun Liu and the others also felt that Shifeng was joking with them when they heard his words. After all, nobody on their team could last more than a few minutes against the twin-headed destruction snake's eyes of destruction. We naturally aren't able to resist the eyes of destruction for long periods. After stretching his body a little, Shifeng chuckled and said, "But what if we make it so that it can't open its eyes for long periods? Preventing it from opening its eyes." Sokyunliu grew confused as she watched Shifeng walk forward. "But where would we find enough experts to target all of its eyes?" The simplest method to deal with the twin-headed destruction snake was to target its eyes of destruction. So long as one could seal its eyes, the twin-headed destruction snake would be no different than an ordinary mythic monster. However, the twin-headed destruction snake had a total of 8 eyes, 4 on each head. The boss also possessed strong regenerative strength, and it could repair any injuries in just 1 second. Meanwhile, even the boss could launch its mental attacks if even one of its eyes remained open. In other words, players needed to attack all 8 eyes once every second. Moreover, these attacks needed to destroy all 8 eyes. To make matters worse, the twin-headed destruction snake's combat standard was at the Trial Tower's 7th floor early stage standard. Thus, it'd take at least 8 refinement realm experts to accurately target and destroy the boss's eyes. Currently, setting aside whether they had enough basic attributes, they didn't even have 8 refinement realm experts on the team. However, Shifeng did not bother explaining himself. Instead, he looked toward Sokyunliu and asked, "Can you guys seal 4 of its eyes?" After thinking for a moment, Sokyunliu said, "If it's only 4 eyes, me, Happy Snow, Fire Cloud, and Desolate Star can just barely handle 1 each." "That's enough, then. I'll take care of the other head by myself," Shifeng said, nodding. "Everyone else, just focus on dealing damage. Tanks, your job is to prevent the boss from charging into the crowd and using AoE attacks. Healers, all you need to do is keep the 5 of us healed. You are going to seal an entire head by yourself, guild leader." Sokyunliu couldn't help but be stunned when she heard Shifeng's words. "Wouldn't that put a lot of pressure on you?" Sokyunliu recalled that Shifeng was quite strong before she left Shadow. Even so, he was only at the half-step refinement realm standard back then. Of course, it had been several years since she left Shadow, so Shifeng must have made some improvements during this period. The fact that Shifeng managed to cast such a powerful monodomain was proof of that. Meanwhile, seeing that he had made such significant improvements in his mana control, he should have made some improvements in his combat standard as well. At this time, he might have already reached the Flowing Water Realm or the Flowing Water Realm's peak. However, destroying 4 eyes of destruction in 1 second wasn't an easy task. It was especially true when Shifeng needed to face the twin-headed destruction snake's physical and mental attacks while doing so. Even a Void Realm expert would have trouble accomplishing such a feat. In addition, the twin-headed destruction snake's high HP meant that they would be in for a long battle. Meanwhile, a long battle also meant more chances to make mistakes, and even one slip-up in this battle could cost everyone their lives. However, before Sokyunliu could finish speaking, Shifeng had already charged toward the twin-headed destruction snake. Subsequently, when Shifeng moved within 100 yards of the twin-headed destruction snake, the boss immediately woke up, lifted its head, and opened its 8 eyes. When the 8 crimson eyes the size of study desks opened, everyone's worlds had seemingly distorted, and everyone had difficulty telling which direction was which. At the same time, an intense headache assaulted everyone's minds, making it impossible for them to stay calm. Its mental attacks are too strong. We can't even get close at this rate. Fire Cloud said, clenching his teeth as he looked at the twin-headed destruction snake. Meanwhile, Sokyunliu also frowned in this situation, her complexion paling slightly from the intense headache she experienced. At this time, her head hurt so much that she couldn't even cast a Tier 3 spell, much less attack the boss with Shifeng. However, while everyone was despairing over the situation, Shifeng had jumped into the air and arrived above the twin-headed destruction snake's heads. Then, he unsheathed the Winter of Eternal Night in mid-air. "Close those damned eyes!" 8 extreme slashes. The next moment, Shifeng brandished the Winter of Eternal Night, creating 8 crescent moons that tore through space and landed on the twin-headed destruction snake's 8 eyes. The boss had just opened its eyes, so it couldn't keep up with Shifeng's actions at all. PSH PSH PSH. Roar. The twin-headed destruction snake's 2 heads let out a painful howl, the intense pain coming from its eyes causing its massive body to distort and flatten the surrounding streets. Subsequently, frightening damages appeared above the twin-headed destruction snake's left head one after another. -1035445. -2130546. -1120648. Damages exceeding 1 million appeared one after another, the total damage racking up to over 10 million and causing everyone to gape in shock.